The 1216th day of the war, there were satellite images showing that all American anti-bunker bombs were launched exactly at the target. However, since the object is underground, it is impossible to understand whether everything is really destroyed there. But if the bombs worked as they worked on the tests, then most likely yes, Iran no longer has nuclear programs. Although for 2 days before the strike, they managed to take something out of the forward object, but it is unlikely that it will help them much, and everything taken out will be destroyed in the coming days, since Israel continues to fully control the Iranian sky. Meanwhile, Trump wrote on social networks that if Iran does not go to concessions and does not want to be great again, then why not change the regime there? It is noteworthy that he wrote this only a couple of hours after his Vice President J.D. Vance said that the United States does not set its goal to change the regime in Iran. Trump continues to be a chaos agent, but at this turn the wheel is hitting the dictators and not the allies of America in some century. UN has freed Andreevka in the Sumy region. Now this is confirmed by the DeepState. It is also reported that the army of Ukraine is now taking counterattacks on other areas of the direction. The promotion of the RF was not too fast, and now, judging by everything, the Russian troops are experiencing even greater difficulties. The UN launched a strike on the oil plant Kristall of the Rostov plant in the Rostov region. The satellites record fires on the objects. Gura also published footage of the Russian train with fuel failure, which was known the day before. Well, this channel is very dissatisfied with the first during the plague, namely the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. They write that so far there was a river of champagne and they ate black caviar with spoons. Fighters of the Russian army continue to collect 3 kopecks per drone and equipment. About this and much more in today's fresh summary, which you can support with your like, your comment, and your subscription. Because for YouTube algorithms, this is one of the main indicators on the basis of which it makes a decision to publish the video further. So subscribe, and thank you very much to those who have already done it, but we move on to what happened in the past day. After the United States made a blow to Iran's nuclear facility, especially the one that has already hit Moscow and the Ford facility, it became a question of whether they managed to do something with them. And this is the specificity of deep bombs. Their application does not lead to the formation of a giant funnel on the surface. Their principle is that they are buried deep underground and are already detonated there. Therefore, what researchers expected from satellite images is the fixation of the fact that the bombs went into the right place. And such a fixation exists. Satellite images show that the bombs went exactly where they should be. As you can see, 6 points of entry, 3 of which are close enough to each other. In fact, they can't give anything else to the images. Although here's another detail that is noticed by the Israeli military expert Egil Levin on his Telegram channel. Israeli ASIN specialist Ben Sion writes Tun Makalis put the plan of the underground nuclear object Ford on satellite images. You can see that the bombs went exactly under the central corridor. Based on these, apparently, pictures, Trump wrote, monumental destructions were carried out in all nuclear objects of Iran, which confirms satellite images. Word destruction is quite appropriate here. The white structure on the picture of the blue cut into the rock, even its roof, is significantly lower than the ground and is completely protected from fire. The main destructions took place deep underground, direct hit, Trump writes. Basically, this is such a schizo version of what I just told you, but in principle, this is a rare case when the US president can be right, because the main question was whether he managed to achieve a bunch of hits and get it. Obviously, they got it. And the next question arises, okay, they got it, but is there a destruction, or is this the fruit of Trump's imagination? The question is not so bad. The problem is that it is impossible to find an answer to it. Based on everything we know about the Ford object and about the JBU-57 mob, the conclusion is clear: everything is in the trough. But due to the fact that all this theoretical knowledge in the end, these bombs were used for the first time in history in military actions, right now, there is no 100% certainty. The problem is that it will not appear. The situation in which we get images from inside the object is not viewed horizontally. Iran itself will not publish them, obviously. The intelligence has no verification mechanism, so everyone is free to believe in their own option. If you support Iran, you can rely on its statement that everything is cool and everything is intact. Let's take into account that absolutely everything that Tigran said last week about broken Israeli planes, about the defeat of Israeli military objects, including Mossad and so on, turned out to be a lie in neural network footage. As in principle, everything that the regime has been carrying for the last 45 years. If you really support the US, then you can rely on Trump's statement, which is also, to put it mildly, a dubious source. If you still strive for some more or less objective picture, then I would say that you can say about 75% probability that the Ford object is destroyed. This calculation is based on the number of bombs used, their characteristics confirmed during the test, and the amount of hits, as well as the absence of direct refusals from Tehran. Another sign, although indirect, is that Iran took the threat seriously and took out something, and possibly everything, from this object not long before the blow. Here you see a line of trucks that are supposed to take out something on June 19. This may be both equipment and enriched uranium. So Tehran took JBU-57 as seriously. Will it help him? It's hard to say. Iran does not have a second Ford. It is very likely that the place where they took everything will be quickly found both with satellite images and with the help of agents of Mossad introduced to the Iranian command. The point of the Ford was that it was impossible to hit this object with anything but the JBU-57. Israel can hit all other objects on the territory of the country. In general, this is already my conclusion, which needed an additional verification by specialists. The Iranian nuclear program is destroyed or almost destroyed. Now the goal is an agreement with Tehran, which will not allow him to work on the new one. In fact, Trump has ideas here. Politically, it is incorrect to use the term change of regime, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why not change the regime? Mega make iron great again, wrote Donald Trump from the social network Truth Social. Of course, Trump's administration would not be Trump's administration if just a few hours before that, Vice President J.D. Vance on the air would not have said that the United States has no purpose to change the regime in Iran. We do not want to change the regime, said Vance. We want to put an end to the nuclear program, and then we want to talk with Iranians about the long-term regulation. If you remember in November 2024, when Trump won, we discussed with you that there is a small chance that the presidency of Trump may be unexpectedly bad for the dictators. Let me remind you how it works. Trump is unpredictable and chaotic, and of course it helps Putin and Xi Jinping in many ways, because of this, the West and US allies cannot build long-term strategies. However, the House agent is the House agent, and it can be put aside, which will hit the dictator himself. This does not mean that he will be in this mess all the time, but this means that the dictator will have to take this into account. Since yesterday, Trump's empty talk in social networks is not just an empty talk. Now there is always a chance that it will turn into decisive actions. And since the US is still the main economic and military force in the world, this will have to be considered. As for the possibility of changing the regime in Iran, the issue is open. It is no secret that the United States has been acting against the killing of Khamenei. And if it seems to you that it is very difficult to kill him, then look at the list of all Iranian generals and leaders that Israel killed in the last week. Khamenei is sitting in a bunker. It is unlikely to help much. We already see that the United States can deal with bunkers. To be honest, I would not want all this because the turbulence in Iran leads to a rise in oil prices and they have not even blocked the strait yet. This period will not last long, but nevertheless everyone will be stressed over the rapidly growing figures and believe that this is a miracle that will save Putin's economy. It won't. Yesterday we talked about this in detail with Vladimir Milov. Listen, he analyzes possible options in detail and what they affect. But still, it would be nice to avoid this or reduce the term to the maximum. Therefore, the best option is still the following scheme. Iran takes its head out of its ass, signs a deal with Khamenei, and gives power to someone less fanatical. Fortunately, there are a lot of candidates. Even the current president of Iran is quite suitable. But this is a problem with fanatics. They do not act rationally. Let's see how it ends, but I still do not think that the operation in Iran will last long. I think by the end of the summer, most likely earlier, but by the end of the summer, I hope it will end and everything will be resolved. However, we do not predict, so maybe in the end everything will end in 5 years as a result of the blood-stained land war, but I still think that such an option is unlikely. In any case, what's the difference? What I think, I'm not an Iranist. It is important that since June 13, the Iranian opportunity to resist was destroyed, the sky was completely captured, and the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic was also destroyed. An incredible result, but not an end point yet. Israel, for example, has not yet touched the main economic objects of the country, giving the elites a chance to escape this, that is, the complete destruction of the state of Iran and the transformation of it into a mess. Let's hope the Iranian elites take advantage of the creation of the Atlantic. For example, reports by reference to sources in the country that there are now many different groups of negotiators who are preparing to shift the Khamenei. So there are many of them, and it's not very good because this is just the perfect cocktail for a civil war, which I would also like to avoid. 90 million. Iran is one of the largest states in the region, one of the most powerful as it turned out until recently at least. I don't really want to immerse it in the path of a civil war. It's ideal for Iran to come out and say, that's it, let's stop. Sorry, we won't do it anymore. Let's be friends with everyone. The United States is removing sanctions, Iran is selling oil in a large amount, and oil prices are falling even more seriously. That would be great. But unfortunately, as you can see, dictators are dictators. Today, by the way, Putin will meet with the head of Iran's foreign ministry. I think he came right away with his suitcases. In general, the Iranians are quite upset that Russia turned out to be a beep partner. Israeli military analyst Gal Levin brings the text of one of the Klaxier's Telegram channels. The dirty nature of Russians and their consistent treacherous blows to the back in these difficult days is a problem that has been warned again and again. Such lords as Alexander Dugin were brought to the Arbian convent. And if you look for it, then the manifestation of the new order of the end of times and other nonsense of Dugin at meetings with our higher officials are easily available on the internet. But when our difficult day came, they easily abandoned us. This is the dirty essence of the Russians, writes this channel. Of course, what is happening with Iran makes Russian military corps think about their own fate. They continue to deny that without mobilization, Russia is not exactly a winner, but it is quite possible to lose. For example, this is what the Nacke military corps writes about. It seems that the point, that is, the demonstratively limited strike of the United States by the deep bombs of the IKR on the nuclear object of Iran has moved NATO countries to achieve internal corporate consensus. Today, the alliance participants agreed to postpone the increase in military spending to 5% of GDP until 2035. Here, the conditional wolf in the face of Trump is satiated, and the conditional sheep led by the EU members are intact. Trump, on the back of the idea of giving the allies of the vassals who swore to fight the Russian Federation, is satisfied with the demonstration of power, and the sheep are on the verge of such castration of Trump's name in their budgets, and in 35, even if the grass does not grow. Thus, NATO not only retains the infrastructure, including the points of military control and logistics in Europe, but also continues to rapidly develop them near the borders of Russia, forcing a specific preparation of the war with the Russians. Things have already been found in Iran, testing the tactics of point-blank strikes. The rest is the matter of the pressure technique on the Libyan or other scenario. The main problem for NATO is now not the Hussites and even not China, but the Astraptics and the Russians. It must be solved. The planner has no time left before the implementation of the apocalyptic scenario. Along with this, with the consensus reached in the alliance, they will try to solve at least 3 tasks. 1. Do not allow the strategic defeat of the Kiev regime in the next year and a half. 2. In the meantime, prepare for combat actions in the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea, first of all, to the Leningrad district, in the direction of military provocations in the area of the Russian-Finnish-Russian-Norwegian border and others. The RF forces will flinch and blur, preventing them from concentrating on the full implementation of combat tasks. At the same time, maintaining the Ukrainian theater of military action as a priority from the perspective of its activation. The proposal of the introduction of troops into the country of NATO members to the coast of Ukraine looks like the primary main task of the partners at the moment. The choice of funds here was not small, taking into account the proposal of a temporary frozen front line, which is now, first of all, categorically disagreeable in the office of the drug lord of the buffer zone, where they have long lost the sense of reality. But Kiev will be broken in the format that suits the Atlanteans and kills Moscow, providing guarantees of military support to the regime and the inviolability of the frontrunners with the change of the Marine administration in Kiev. It is not easier for us from these planned combinations, and we have 2 allies besides the fatherland to the fighting North Koreans. There's an opinion that to surround the regime in the buffer zone, returning at least Novorossiya, the RF needs from 500 to 1 million bayonets. How to find them without mobilization is incomprehensible. The need for mobilization, for example, even whole generals say, but they only speak, and in the center they slow down. Thus postponing the full performance of the tasks assigned to the center. The separation is obvious and it is not difficult to notice. True, lack of meat and the fighting people in Russia are already a problem, depending on whether we take a pause at the Ukrainian theater of military action on the eve of the Great War, or whether we continue to squeeze blood from the landing and Kutra on the way to Dnipro. So, as you can see, the unhappy faces of the simple Zetniks who are very upset with Iran is upset with him and sees that Russia is constantly hitting the spin. In general, the absolute classic of everything. Well, I will leave the discussion about what the West is planning or not planning the ZVNKORs in the country, because I would really like to believe them. You know that Strelkov, think right, he is constantly there. The West is generally just going to strike and enter Ukraine and all that. It would be great, but in fact it is not so. In fact, unfortunately, the motives of the West are quite clear. The actions are also not hidden. There are no plans there. And this, unfortunately, only says that the war and defense of Ukraine is primarily lying on the shoulders of the Ukrainians themselves, the Ukrainian Armed Forces. We closed yesterday's meeting, but we will start tomorrow. Thank you very much to everyone who participated in it. Before we move on, I will remind you that you can support this channel financially. You can do it on Patreon. The link is in the description. And buying NVPN is a means to bypass blockages that allows you to bypass blockages. Watch YouTube at normal speed, use Telegram, Twitter, Instagram. Telegram has not yet been blocked, but it seems to me not for long. In any case, you are not a state, but you must decide what to watch, listen, read. NVPN allows you to do this. You can buy on the link in the description. It is legal. In Russia, it is not yet prohibited to buy and use NVPN. While buying in VPN, you support the release of new videos on this channel, and we continue with you. The Ukrainian Defense Forces have freed Andreevka in the Sumy region and were able to stabilize their left flank, says DeepState. The 225th Separate Assault Regiment was able to establish control over the inhabited area after continuous fighting and clearing of the undamaged villages. Analysts say that these actions were possible, firstly, to distinguish the forces of the enemy from other villages, since the enemy clung to Andreevka; secondly, to stop further advance towards the important inhabited areas of Cotton and Pisarivka. The 225th Regiment remains one of the few units capable of carrying out successful offensive actions, while those who understand the reality know that the loss of the 225th is significantly less than the rest. A battalion tactical group of the 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade, which the brigade itself recently wrote about, was surrounded in the village. It is written in DeepState. We will talk in detail about what is happening on the front line tomorrow, what happened during the whole week. We talked about it yesterday, but yes, we see that the stabilization of the Sumy region continues. Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian military, Mr. Sieski, as well as independent analysts, who rarely speak something that does not correspond to reality, even if the authorities say something else. Again, in Ukraine, even now, from the point of view of analytical resources and criticism of the authorities, criticism of decisions, questioning the statements of the authorities, there was no such freedom in Russia even in peacetime. Therefore, when you are told about some incredible military censorship in Ukraine, there really is a military censorship. It concerns everything that concerns the publication of data on specific movements, specific means of transport. There is one thing I know where, as a result, a person was imprisoned for this for a short time. Well, if we are not talking about direct work for Russia, of course, and without war probably, but the war is particularly punished. And so in Ukraine, there are a huge number of speakers who openly criticize the authorities, do not agree with them, military analysts, and so on. And in fact, that is why DeepState remains one of the most reliable research projects, research teams, in which, in fact, Ukrainians and Russians determine the real situation on the battlefield. We are moving on to the Ukrainian strikes on the territory of the Atlas Rostov plant in the Rostov region. Fuel reservoirs are burning as a result of the drone hit. The fact of the fire on the territory of the enterprise was recorded by the NASA firm's satellite service. A strong fire was reported at 3:41 a.m. on the entire territory of the plant, where 32 oil product cisterns were deployed. There were no official statements about the incident at the time of the publication, the military wrote. The Russian Ministry of Defense only reported that a fire occurred as a result of an attack on an industrial facility in the Kamensky district. It should be noted that Atlas Combine is not the first to become a target for Ukrainian drones. In particular, on the night of November 29, 2024, a large-scale fire occurred at the enterprise after the attack on the strike UAVs. Before that, there were flights in it. Reservoirs of the Combine are an important element located on the territory of Ukraine by the logistical support of the Russian army. Earlier, the military reported that Ukrainian UAVs attacked an industrial zone near the now-working factory Lukol in the city of Kristall in the Nizhny Novgorod region. This attack has resumed the trend of Ukrainian strikes on the objects of the Russian fuel and energy complex after a long pause. The day before June 6, before that attack, an oil storage facility, Rostov Kristall in Angels, where, according to sources, there is an aviation fuel for the strategic aviation of the Russian Federation, was hit. Given that the hit on the Kristall could be part of the targeted series of attacks on the long-range capabilities of the Russian Air Force, as a result, we see that Ukraine is slowly resuming attacks on oil bases on the NPP. We will hope that they will only increase them. Because the Ukrainian opportunities that have passed for 2 months, in my opinion, there was no attack on the NPP and on the oil base have greatly increased. And I think that hitting on the Russian logistics of fuel infrastructure is an absolutely correct approach, which in principle is adhered to, for example, by the Main Intelligence Department of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Yura published a video of the attack of drones on the Russian railway compound with fuel under Takmak. In a message of the Main Intelligence Department, it is said that in this operation, military special forces participated in the Special Forces of the Mountain of Ukraine, Kabul 9, in cooperation with the Operative Strategic Group, Korditsa, Operative Tactical Group Zaporozhye under the division of Alpha and the Special Forces Group Next. It also took place at the railway station between the settlements of Levadno and Malachansk, indicates the mountain. Black columns of smoke and fire from the hit cisterns with diesel fuel and other fuel materials rose to the sky, they write. Astro earlier wrote that NASA satellites record a fire near Tykaymakum in the Zaporozhye region, in the area of the crossing between the villages of Levadno and Malachansk. The media before that reported that there was such a smuggling search transporting cisterns with fuel. Actually, yesterday we discussed this with you, and now a video appeared that confirms all this. What's interesting is that these strikes seem to be made in Pevishki while the distance is quite large. Is the drone used for this purpose? Or in principle the opportunities of Ukrainian Pevishki have increased? The question is also open, but we see regular attacks on this area. In general, Russia has built an iron road on the occupied territories in order to carry out military transport, all kinds of armored vehicles, fuel, and so on. In principle, if it is possible to establish constant strikes on the Russian composition, then there will be no sense from this road at all. Therefore, we wish this guru good luck. Russia continues to attack civilian facilities. As if the train with fuel that carries military fuel is not a civilian facility, but residential buildings are. In Kiev, a Russian strike destroyed the entrance to a residential building. 6 people were killed, almost 20 were injured. At night, Russian troops shelled Kiev in the Shevchensky district of the city. The same entrance collapsed in the residential building. The GCC of Ukraine reports about this and brings the footage. According to the latest data, 6 people were killed, 19 were injured. Emergency services even managed to save 10 people. 2 children and a pregnant woman were killed for them. Also under shelling, Podolsk, Golosovskaya, Ezvyashinskaya, Solomenskaya, and Dornskaya districts of the city were hit, reported the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Igor Klimenko. In the Kiev region, in the event of an attack, 1 person died, 8 were wounded, among them 2 rescuers who were injured during the liquidation of the consequences of the shelling. In the Air Forces of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it was reported that in the whole of the USSR, 325 strike drones were launched across Ukraine, 11 ballistic missiles, and 5 cruise missiles. Russian shelling almost every night, there are even more than Iranian shelling of Israel, for example. And like Iran, Russia is hitting civilian objects. Does it constantly? Does it purposefully? Unfortunately, Ukraine lacks the possibility of air defense in order to completely eliminate all air targets that fly to kill Ukrainians. Therefore, the work on air defense systems, the work on drone interceptors is now, I hope, the priority of the Ukrainian authorities. At the same time, the Russians still hit the military objects of the Z channel and showed a video of an alleged strike on the training ground, which was previously declared by the Soviet Union. According to the Telegram channel Nacke, Russia inflicted a missile strike on the ground in the area of DVD-Vbrod in the Kherson region. Ukrainian land forces recognized the death of 3 people. The number of victims increased to 14. The department did not reveal the location of the ground. At the same time, on the TG channel Nikolaevsky Vanyak, it was stated that it was about an object in the Nikolaev region. It also publishes the details of the incident and a call to the Ukrainian authorities. It was in our region that Billy was hit in the airfield. Under the above, now, 3-200 commission and other formulations that are not changing in the route. What were they doing with the previous commission, for example, after Shaska? What conclusions have they reached? Who is guilty? Were they punished guilty? There are more questions than answers. Mr. Shapovalov, make yourself this priority and put things in order. The Super Beepo was flying there for at least 20 minutes. We are talking about a Russian reconnaissance drone which detects targets, the Super Beep. As for this strike, of course, it is impossible to completely exclude the training of the fighters, considering that it is Iskander. Iskander hits far enough. That is, there is no such thing as training or not the front. No, this is not the Russian army. They trained really far, but at the same time, Russia can still get long ranges with rockets. The main problem here is that there was a scout hanging above the airfield. And if he's hanging, then they have to notice A and stop any training, knock him down B so that there is no opportunity to fire, and so on. But that is, the ISKNDER does not work on its own, it needs guidance. That is why it is very important to ensure the absence of these most unmanned scouts in the sky and watch out for them. And if they suddenly appear, it means that the enemy is aiming, it means that you need to stop any training. This is how I interpret the words of Nikolaevsky Vanya, and the second is a question about the commissions because there have already been several flights to Ukrainian testing grounds. One of them even led to the resignation of Mikhail Dravdov, not because he was fired, but because he himself filed a report about the resignation. They say that this is his sphere of responsibility, land forces, and he does not consider that he did everything necessary. I do not agree with him, but nevertheless. And in general, every time when this happens for the 3rd time, probably for quite a long time, and every time the Ukrainian leadership reacts to this, Zelensky even mentioned this. But as you can see, for example, Nikolaevsky Vanyak says that he does not see the result of all this. That is, commissions are created, investigations are carried out, and so on. But the problem still remains. Although again, the number of victims, 3 people, say that some actions were still taken. Because if the blow was just on the ground where they are now conducting classes with Kandera, then, of course, there would be much more victims. 3 people, 3 defenders of Ukraine who gave their lives for the country. But again, it is important for Ukraine to do everything possible so that these lives are not given in vain, in the sense that it was, well, to lose people during training, during practice. This is an intolerable luxury for the Ukrainian army, as for any Russia. However, it doesn't matter, its army in Ukraine should not, and obviously it doesn't matter. But if it is possible to somehow fix this root issue, the issue is open. We will hope that there is, and that the newly formed commission will really allow us to understand what happened, and most importantly, what to do so that this does not happen again. About some problems in the Ukrainian troops which we discussed with you earlier, they are actively working. This was also told by the Ukrainian journalist Sieski. Ukrainian troops have moved from battalion and company bases to positions designed for maximum detachment. This was reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. General Alexander Sieski during a conversation with journalists. According to the general, the experience of the Bakhmut company showed that large-scale bases and battalion areas of defense have lost their effectiveness. The armed forces have moved to company bases, then platoon. Now we see that the most effective position is the maximum detachment, the commander says. Now the preference is given to compact fortifications elements, a group of trenches and so-called frog holes, reducing the risk of being hit by drones. After all, according to Sieski, modern drones, especially working through fiber optic, are capable of penetrating into the smallest gaps. The commander noted the importance of the equipment of all anti-drone protection. Special attention should be paid to the blocking of the supply lines in order to minimize the threat for both military and BPA operators. You can see that the development of drones dictates changes in the tactics of the use of troops and in the requirements for fortification. If earlier all fortification structures were built for the purpose of preventing the enemy's advance, including in an open area where the enemy could apply a large number of armored vehicles, then the approaches have changed. Everything is built around the landings of forests with the best camouflage properties, says Sieski. He separately emphasized that the effectiveness of any fortification depends primarily on the presence of a personal component. If the fortification is not occupied by troops or there are not enough of them, for example, when a well-equipped point of defense has only 2 or 3 soldiers, it does not fulfill its functions. Sieski also reminded how the line of defense is prepared. The first line is prepared by the troops directly during combat operations. The second line is usually prepared by the engineering units of the armed forces and the State Special Service of Transport, together with civil organizations. And the third line, the capital line, is built by the regional military administrations. In addition, operative and tactical groups of the Ukrainian Armed Forces are formed by special groups on the issues of fortification equipment. In addition to the creation of such groups, the ATU commander will receive deputies responsible for the construction of engineering fortifications. So of course, the Ukrainian army is working on the issue of errors in the speed of this work and the effectiveness of this work. We will hope that both at a high level and very soon the Ukrainian army will be able to solve the problems that have accumulated and even more effectively stop the Russian offensive. The confessions of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, and not only in connection with the crumbling speeches of Putin's officials, are still being spread across the Telegram, especially the Russian military community. The forums were outraged at the party, black caviar, champagne, and all this while Russian soldiers collect 3 kopecks for another jugal without a roof to go to the attack where they will die. This is what the military informant writes behind the channel. In the background of their collection of copters and conversations about the mobilization economy, a certain number of privileged people are more concerned with the flash of champagne and the collision of the silver server, without even trying to pretend that they understand what reality they live in. The MEF has already ended, but the echo of social parties in the Telegram channel's histories of guests is still being heard. Of course, we are talking about the scandalous Shabash from Alpha, with black caviar and champagne for 30,000 rubles and stars with millions of dollars. And this is not just a one-time story, the illusion of success instead of real participation, as if the Red Bank is doing everything to make it look royal. But behind this is a deafening attack to the country, to time, to people, and Friedman is freely walking around Patrick and leaves there a few millions for the evening. And why listen to people if you can listen to Leps and the crunch of tortoltos with black caviar? While other companies bring innovation to PMEF and come up with presentations, Alpha brings Don Perignon instead of Crimean champagne. And all this happens against the background of constant attacks on the Russian capital and border territories, he writes. Here I have to say something. For me, it is quite obvious that in the Russian Telegram there was a massive attack on Alpha Bank. Well, like a massive and direct attack. This is a recognizable style, this is a recognizable handwriting. Throwing, well, like the same narratives, not quite natural for certain channels, phrases, and all that. Well, that is, military intelligence, for example, is a Z channel that, well, does not really fall on this one. People's indignation is not the same. Military intelligence, for example, tries to position itself as such a Z channel, but for not quite degenerates. Well, that is, it sort out real military operations back and forth, and in principle there are quite often plus-minus adequate assessments of what is happening. Therefore, it is obvious that there is an order against the Alpha Bank. Apparently, well, this is, in fact, one of the last banks that does not belong to the state directly or indirectly. Well, it fulfills its orders, of course. That's why apparently there was some kind of struggle for the Alpha Bank, which is great, which is cool. I'm for them to swallow each other's throats, especially Friedman, who, at the beginning of the full-scale war, tried to do things that he didn't have to do. He even tried to collect some of these letters to protect himself. From Sergei Parkhomenko, Evgeny Albats or Keshin, Leonid Volkov, and so on. He used to go to some courts to get the sanctions removed, but when he got a coup everywhere, he came back to Russia. And he just lives there calmly. Alpha Bank supports everything that needs to be supported. Therefore, let them eat each other, so to speak. A great change will begin. But it's also an interesting period of time. There are fewer resources, so they all drink each other up. But in general, the style of the order is similar to that of a typical merchant, or rather, not that the merchant ordered, but that the merchant performed. So you may not be very interested in all this, but in general, the mood that is described in this post does not exist. They, however, are not specifically aimed at the blood bank, but the Zetniks in general perceive the whole PMEF as a feast during the plague, as just satisfied blyat, as they call them, just having fun while the Russian soldiers really drink from the puddle. And collect some kind of the cheapest car for themselves, which they will cut off the roof and by order of the commander will just go to die. I have no sympathy for Russian soldiers in this regard. Those who at least eat caviar with spoons on the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, at least it is clear why they became cannibals. That is, why they support the war and all that, so that they can eat caviar with spoons and drink Dom Perignon. People have such values. But why do people go to war, to the Russian army, where there is no money and nothing? Only the commander will beat you in a direct and transferable way. And this, of course, is a question of what is called with an asterisk. With a trick. Well, if you have doubts about the lawlessness in the Russian army, then let's once again dispel these doubts with the story of Russian soldiers. The soldier turned to the citizens and the president of the Russian army for the lawlessness of command. Leshnikov Nikita Alexeyevich, born in 2007, a call sign Zhuzhik, on March 10 signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense in which he served as a grenade launcher in the 102nd Shooting Stick of the military unit of 1917-6. He claims that the fighters were sent to combat tasks without the necessary equipment. At first everything was fine. We were sent to the assault without medicine, without food, without water. We were stormed. We hit a combat comrade with a wound in the hand. Something happened to him, but I had only one gun here on the armor. In setting the combat tasks, the group was told that they were their own at the point, but in fact it turned out that there was an enemy there. For no reason, the group was returned back. In the location, we were told that now we would take everyone to the hospital, that everything would be fine. After that, we were beaten with sticks by the Nazis in the pit. In the morning, 2 or 3 days, I don't remember, 2 days passed, and in the morning we were given money. Who wants to stay in the pit, and who does not want to stay in the pit, give money. I started looking for money, 175,000. I have transfers, screenshots, all this is there. While Nikita was looking for money, his wife wrote a statement to the military prosecutor's office. 2 days later, police officers came to Gorlovka for Nikita and took him away. They hide me in command. They start beating me behind some kind of handcuffs. They start insulting me and saying that I'm a thug. At that moment, I did not know that the prosecutor's office had come. I was beaten, my ribs were beaten, and I had a scar from the handcuffs. In despair, Nikita grabbed a grenade and tried to scare the prosecutor's employees so that they would leave and stop beating him. As a result, he was taken away by a grenade and thrown into a pit again. I had a mild inflammation, very severe. I was suffocating for 2 or 3 days in a pit. I was taken into a pit, taken to some unknown direction. Turned out that it was recommended to the engineering troops, where he first built ranches in Gorlovka and then in Avdiivka. After a while, Nikita found out that he was specifically hidden from the military prosecutor's office so that everyone would calm down. They demanded money from me, they mocked me. The command tried to hurt me somehow. They sent me to Sochi when I was still in the unit, just sent to other troops. But they sent me to Sochi. Nikita's mother came to the military police, and he did not understand what was going on. In such a situation, he was forced to go to Sochi, as he himself said. Now, at the moment, I am in Sochi. Due to the fact that I am afraid of my life, I was given a clear idea. Either 200 or 300 is heavy, my command. From here, only one road. Nikita is very afraid of his health and life. He is regularly called by representatives of the command and sent to me real orders which he translated. Like translated, but in fact not translated because there is no print on the orders. I am very afraid of my life. I want to live. As well as my combat comrades, I am sure that if one of them is alive, they will say, the 13th call guy, he knows all this, he saw it all, he can confirm it all if he is alive. I wonder if this is the 13th or the other. The fighter claims that the command does not consider them as people and in confirmation tells about the situation that happened with him. They just kick us out. They send us to the slaughterhouse to the meat, just to the meat. That's the situation. I was shot by a guy who had 5 children because he just drank. Nikita is not sure that he will be able to hide for a long time, so he asks to give his story as much as possible. Perhaps I will no longer be in touch after this video because people are looking for me now, and perhaps I will no longer be in touch. I just ask people to know the truth. What's going on here? I'm 18 years old. Well, Nikita, always glad to help. Here's an explanation for your story, but it won't help anything. You're already a walking corpse? Well, if you don't desert normally or surrender to captivity. And Nikita's story teaches us not compassion for the Russian military, but that you have to be a complete moron to go to the Russian army. If you go there, everything will be the same with you, although Nikita is still lucky. He is alive and has all the limbs in place. Usually there is a completely different situation there. The commanders zero out to the right and left, and the rebels are usually not particularly released. Therefore, keep this in mind, and if you have already joined the Russian army, then go to the forest. An organization that can help you with deserting. And finally, about the new elite, those who have returned from the army, guided for the murder and beep of a member of the SWO. As part of the CHVK, Wagner conducts meetings at the OSCE for school children. The resident of Syzran, Samara region, Viktor Tatikov, has returned from the war against Ukraine without a hand. Now he visits schools, children's sports competitions. And attention, the Telegram channel does not speak Moscow. In April 25, the man held a training camp for 8th graders on the basis of the safety of life activities within the framework of the local rehabilitation project, The Way of the Hero from Israel. On the pages of the project's VK photographs, it can be seen that Tatikov came to the children with a Wagner chevron. The weight is 200 and we are together. Instead of the left hand, he has a prosthesis. On May 6, as an honorable guest, he participated in a children's championship at Taekwondo. In 2009, Viktor Tatikov was sentenced in the Samara region for beep and murder. The case materials say that Tatikov and his accomplice raped and strangled a 22-year-old girl, and the body was thrown into the bushes on the bank of the local river. After the ASTRA database found out that Tatikov, born on May 6, repeatedly became involved in criminal responsibility. According to the articles, robbery is the cause of serious health harm, beep, and murder. The man was punished in the VK-26 in the Samara region. Probably from there, he went to war with Ukraine. In the photos of the social network Tatikov, where he is in military uniform, the chevron and awards of the CHVK Wagner are visible. When visiting school, the man usually wears a protest, but in other photos in his social networks, it can be seen that he has no left hand, approximately on the shoulder. So in 1924, Tatikov flew from Moscow to Almaty, where he received an individual identification number. Having become a Kazakhstan tax resident, he probably signed a bank card of one of the banks of Kazakhstan. It's probably impossible to do it without the internet, but this is no longer such important information. The most important thing is that this person works with children and this person teaches them something. Children are in danger, their parents must understand this. If at your school, at the competition, some SWO person appeared, especially a Wagner person, run and take children from there. This naturally threatens life. What will he have when he swears, when he starts killing people around? Will he try to beep children? This is a question, let's say, with a high probability of exceeding the acceptable level, because we have already listened to these stories with you. Therefore, take care of yourself, take care of your children, avoid any connection with the Russian army, with the Russian military. Do not work on it, do not produce anything for it, and keep as far as possible if you want to live. Well, Michael Nacke was with you, and see you soon. All the best. Bye.